Howdy folks, Jonathan from North Beach Windsurfing here. Today we're going to talk about the differences between the 2022 Starboard foil board offerings in the wing department. They have two different models, so I think with the advancements that we're seeing with winging and foil sports continuing to blossom into their own individual disciplines and whatnot, I think we're going to continue to see multiple models being launched from different brands, and Starboard's one of the first to actually kind of come forth and do that. So we've got the wingboard, we've got the takeoff. This will kind of give you an idea about which board is designed for what and why it's shaped that way. So we'll start things off with the wingboard. This is the board that they designed last year and was their first go at a specific shape tailored towards winging. Last year's board was really focused on making it as easy as possible for beginner wingers to learn how to foil. Overall, every board in the lineup has gotten a little bit shorter. They've brought in a little bit more volume up into the entire board. So last year's board had a lot more volume up in the nose and not as much in the back. This year's board seems to be more even keeled. They have more volume in the tail, so this board is extremely stable underfoot. It doesn't feel like you're going to be sinking off the back of the board at all if you rock backwards. So on top of that, they've added longer foil boxes, and they pushed them a lot further forward in each board shape. So what that does is it allows you to get your foil, any foil that you have, you can push it a little bit further forward on the board, and what you can set that up with is basically the lift point of the foil will balance out with the center of gravity of the board itself. So that lets the foil do less work. And then you can ride it a little bit more intuitively. It feels very easy to control and very balanced on foil. It's one of the best pumping wing boards that I've gotten to use, because you feel like the foil is directly underneath you and you don't have any additional or unnecessary swing weight on the nose. It just feels super well balanced between your front and back foot, so the board tends to pivot around super nicely and pump along through. Wingboards have always been designed to make life easy for people learning how to wing, and geared specifically towards flat water. You can see from the rocker profile that this board is got a pretty straight rocker, and this lets the thing release off the water really well. It gives you a lot of stability. You can see that this board is a little bit on the wider side for its length. This is a 4.9 by 26 inches wide. 70 liters, that's pretty ballpark with a lot of other shapers out there, but this does feel nice and wide underneath your feet, especially when you're prepping your gear in the kneeling position and getting up to your feet for the first time. You can see that the rails are super chunky on this, and they've cut out a ton of material from the middle of the board. So this is their signature like concave profile shape, where it kind of like the standing tray of the board is recessed into the board, and the rails have tons of support. Like, this is just extremely buoyant. So anytime you push on the rail of the board, the rail itself pushes back and it kind of forces you back to stand center with the board underneath you, and it helps you not fall in every other second when you're first learning, which is a great feature. What I've noticed with this board is that it is very stable once it's just kind of sitting there in the water, and it's very easy to stand up to your feet and slog around on it. Once you get enough drive and speed, it tracks really well and then just releases up on the foil without any drama. All that's pretty good. Where I have seen some kind of the limitations of this board is in aggressive turns. So either on flat water, if you're doing really aggressive banking turns, like a really fast high G 360, for instance, or you start to notice it in wavier conditions where you're getting up and over wave tops, or you're literally riding waves. So what tends to happen is the wide shape will grab onto a wave's edge, right? And it'll start to carve a little bit. It digs into the wave instead of releasing. So that's the main drawback from this shape, is that it does have more of a flat water bias. But if you're a beginner winger, you don't really have any business being out in the waves for a while. So it's actually a great beginner through intermediate. And if your focus is purely on flat waters, then it's great for advanced riders too, because of those forgiving attributes I told you about, including the ability to pump better than almost any other wingboard that I've been on. So it's got a lot going for it, but pure wave use, that's not one of them. That brings us to the next board. The Takeoff is kind of a new concept from Starboard altogether. Basically, this is an evolution from their Hyperfoil boards from last year, but in a kind of taken to a radically new approach. Main difference here is that this board is much more compact than Hyperfoils of old, and they're using a lot more wingboard style shaping techniques. Things like concave, like a really deep concave in the tray. Different rail outlines, like much shorter profiles, more compact shape underfoot. The Hyperfoils tended to be a little bit on the long side for any given shape or example. They never really got away from that trend. Really square, bulky rails with flat decks. So these are a much different approach to it. So this is a really well-rounded wingboard or subfoil board. You can even prone on this thing. This is a shape that's designed to be in water that has a lot more texture, a lot more bumps. So waves, downwinding, choppy water where you're getting like swells between 1 and plus whatever feet you've got. The reason why different shapes will work better in certain situations is because things like rocker line, where you've got this basically curvature in the board. This board having a little bit more rocker, specifically in the shoulders on where the rails and the chines up here in the front of the board and the outline all meet to make a much more rounded board. This board tends to not grab the water, and it tends to fit a little bit more in wavy conditions. That being said, it does hold its own in flat water. They've designed enough features into this to make it still friendly for use in flat water. However, it's not as stable underneath your feet, especially when you're setting up your equipment or getting on it for the first time in the kneeling position. These boards tend to wash around a little bit more underneath you. They don't stay planted. You don't drive them quite as directionally under your foot. So this one tends to suit people that have a little bit more experience and have a little bit more efficient drive, have that ability with the wing to drive a board forcefully through the water. So yeah, it does tend to benefit those who have winged before. That being said, it's not difficult to use once you know what you're doing. The rails here, it does provide like sharp release from the water and enough direction to guide the board up on a foil pretty well. Once you're in the air, that's where this board starts to shine. You're getting a little bit more aggressive on stuff. If you're doing things like freestyle and riding waves more often, then the Takeoff is definitely more suited towards that person. The Takeoff is better suited towards waves or bumpier water. If you're a little bit more advanced, sending it more in dynamic conditions, doing freestyle jumps and that kind of stuff, then the Takeoff is probably a little bit better, especially when it comes to recoveries. The wingboard is more suited towards that beginner intermediate rider in flat water venues. This is going to provide a more stable experience. If I had to rate the two, I would say that the wingboard is a 10 out of 10 in the flat water, maybe a 7 out of 10 in the waves. If I were to compare the Takeoff, I would say that it's got an 8 out of 10 on the flat water, but probably like a 10 out of 10 in the waves. If you got any questions on these things or looking to get your name on a list where you may be able to order one of these things, we do have more on the way. You can always give us a call at the shop or email us, and we'll be happy to assist you in any way that we can. Well, thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you on the